Well, Guy, welcome into the Raw. Good to have you, mate. I know you're an avid listener of the podcast. No, you're not, actually. You're timing in Invercargill. You haven't even given us the time of day, mate. Hey?
I'm waiting for the link.
Sorry, it's probably on me.
Right,
Yeah. Probably been a bit busy, Nick.
Yeah, he has had a wee bit going on. Good chance, mate, with the Sharks season obviously finishing up on the weekend to reflect. It's had its challenges, certainly no doubt. But, mate, to be fair, the way that you and the team have dug themselves out of a pretty sizable hole on the back half of the year, that's got to be something that fills you with a bit of pride as you reflect back.
Oh, I'm very proud of how things finished. I mean, I probably never had a year like this one, actually. I mean, we were 0-11. Pretty doom and gloom when you're at that point and you think, oh, it could be a duck egg. We might go through the thing and not pick anything up. And but look, I as I've said numerous times, I reckon that things changed internally, and obviously we had a lot of disruption with American imports and that kind of thing, and made changes, and changes were forced on us. And anyway, the back end of it was a completely different story. So the attitude started to shift at training. We made some changes to our roles and how we were playing and how we were going about training. And I felt like we had a couple of good weeks, and that was starting to come together. And but then it really just accelerated. I mean, the back half of the year, I just felt it wasn't a smooth ride, but we got better and better and better, to the point, if you take away a pretty unfortunate, let's say deplorable refereeing call in one of our games that took a win off us, we would have finished at a 500 record for the back half of the year, which, considering where we were, I couldn't be more proud of the boys in the club and how they went about it.
It felt like one of the sort of turning points too was the form of Callum McRae in that back end of the season. I mean, I'm not pretending to be a basketball expert, but it felt like when he sort of come on at that back end of the season and things just really lifted off the back of that.
Yeah, true, Logan. I mean, even our numbers in the early part of the year, we recognised that when the ball touched his hands, our basketball was just a lot better. However, to put the video evidence in front of people and the training emphasis to make that happen, and then to actually get out in games where a few players that we had at the time just had their own agendas on that weren't there at the end of the year, that were sort of running counter to that plan. It just didn't see the best of him come out every game. But once we settled into that, and we had players come in, very notably Cooper Robb, that gave him a steady diet of the ball, and everyone feasted off that because he's such a good passer. I mean, I think he was the the only big man in the top half dozen assist leaders in the league, and he made sure everyone else got a fair slice of the ball, and our play elevated.
We know we've talked previously about just the amount of work that goes on building a roster in the off season and doing your due diligence and whatnot. How tough was it to get into those early rounds and realise that some of those things that you'd worked so hard at putting together wasn't quite the right fit?
Well, we got hit really hard. I mean, really it fell off the cliff in the pre-season because the key signing in all that was the point guard, which in basketball parlance is your floor general, your coach on the floor, your key playmaker. And every sport's usually got one of those people. And the guy that we brought in, Josh Turner, was a lovely fella, and we'd done a lot of work on him and due diligence around him. He wasn't actually our first choice, but a couple of the players that we had looked at signed in other leagues, and we didn't get them. So we were down the list a little bit to about the fourth option with Josh, but he was an experienced player, and I felt like he would be the right addition to our league. And unfortunately, by the time we got him here, he sort of, I suppose, just felt like the league was a little bit in front of him, or not completely suitable to his style of play, and he really checked out a little bit, and that was disappointing. So we only found that out in the pre-season, to be honest, and after our first regular season game against the Otago Nuggets, he actually well, we had an emergency meeting with him literally 15 minutes after the game because he just wanted to leave, pack up and go. So that really rocked us back on our heels. He was a guy that really wanted the job and wanted the contract, and then got here and decided that he didn't want the contract. And when it's that key playmaker, it just threw everything else into disarray.
Have you been in that situation with a player before, Guy?
Oh, not at all, Nathan. Not with a player that, as I said, is a key or chief playmaker. And then when it became clear that Josh just wasn't really invested in the club, then we had to move pieces around and make people that are finishers, turn them into creators, and move people up or down a number on their role, and it just didn't work. And when you get off to such a bad start and people are out of roles and you're trying to turn strengths into weaknesses just take strengths away to shore up a weakness and remove your own strengths at the same time, there's nothing really for your foundation. And I was just really scrambling. I hadn't faced that situation before. And remembering last year, we had an MVP player in Jeremy Kendall, who was the point guard for the club. And he was a real rock on how we based all our play. And so we went from the sublime to the ridiculous. And it was just a difficult phase to negotiate.
And that 0-11, you as coach at that stage, do you start to doubt yourself at that stage of the season?
Oh yeah, very much so. I mean, I just felt like I was running out of ideas at that point. And but like anything, if you can actually lock into some standards and benchmarks about how you want to train, become less complex, keep things as simple as you can make them. So we had a bit of a shift, I think, in our training mindset. And the other part with that too was to try and make sure that our trainings were really enjoyable and positive. So just started to let go of things like highly critical video reviews and that sort of thing, because if you're on a losing streak, they probably weren't helping. So our video sessions became a little bit more cheerleading and here are our good plays and that kind of thing. And so while we were underwater, we were trying not to drown. And then we clearly had some personnel changes being forced on us because we were getting the poorest import contribution in the league by far. But we hung on to that point and eventually were able to sign two very good young players in Cooper and Caleb, and in time they made a big difference. Well, Cooper made a difference immediately, like from the very first training session, but then Caleb found his feet and became a really good player.
Do you have people that you sort of go to when you're in those, I guess, a bit of a crisis or times of need?
Yeah, I had a number of people, and one person that had a different perspective on things was actually Luke Longley, who's Michael Jordan's ex-teammate at the Chicago Bulls. And Luke relayed a story that after he was traded from the Bulls, maybe arguably the greatest team ever in basketball, that he got traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves and had two enormous losing seasons. And his recollection of that and his advice from that was to keep the environment enjoyable. And because if it goes the other way and guys just start playing for themselves and become ultra selfish and protect their stats and pad their stats and try and work on their next job, then pretty much all is lost. And we had a couple of really good discussions about that, and that really helped me. So I had a good circle of people to turn to.
Have you learnt anything from that recruitment process, or is that just part of the game when you're dealing with guys throughout the world, that you can do all the video work and whatnot, and until you get there, you don't know? That's just part of the game. Or have you learned anything from this experience?
Yeah, definitely learned from it. I reckon that we locked into one or two agents that knew the market a little bit better, or we discovered that knew the market a little bit better than perhaps a couple that we were using that were throwing names out there left, right, centre, but how good a fit would they be? And So those agents become particularly useful for us, but also I think not to limit ourselves to that. So Cooper came here to Invercargill as the direct result of a player that I used to coach in the NBL in Australia and had a long-term relationship, and he's now coaching in the States. So I think that some of those networks are useful as well. But look, there's a particular environment about a regional club and a smaller town club. You want to get the right fit for that, and someone who can fit well into the community as well. So yeah, lots of lessons learned from this particular one, and but it just goes to show how important that these selections are for our team, and they can be a little bit of a lottery because you don't really know anyone till you get them in your environment. So no matter how many recommendations you get, but yeah, look, it appeared that we had lost the lottery well and truly in early stages, but thankfully the two guys we finished with were darn good.
It's the challenge, right? You know, I know you've talked about this a lot. You can acquire talent or you can build a team, you know, and it's such a fine margin, right? So you take a couple of pieces that weren't the fit out, you bring in a Cooper Robb and a Caleb Asprey, and then it all starts to kind of come together, right? You know, so dealing in those margins, such a fine line. I guess I'm describing your career in one sentence there almost,
yeah,
right?
No, but it's very true though, Nick, and the team as a collective, it can be a bit of a fragile thing. So if you've got people that just are playing in a way that's not conducive to how they're going to play their best basketball, or a role that they're not well suited to do, it can have a big impact on things. But the other part of it as well is that I think for Sharks basketball, you need to leverage upon, you don't want every year to be a reset. So you want to be able to leverage upon what you're building with your core fundamentals, your core standards, your style of play, those sorts of things. And to me, that was the most disappointing thing early, because I reckon that we put in a good style of play last year. And then when things became apparent with our recruitment at the start of the year, which, end of the day, I've got to put my hand up and take the responsibility for, it undid all the work we'd done in 2023. And we had to go back and start from zero. So that was most disappointing to me. But by the end, and by the second half of the year, I think we'd fixed that and we'd found a great way to play, and we're quite competitive.
I guess it's easier said than done, though, in the basketball world to be able to roll in a similar side year to year, isn't it? Just the nature of the beast, I suppose it's pretty challenging.
Yeah, it is challenging, but you want to try and get, I reckon, the weight of it. If you can get, let's say, a 50% return of personnel, you're doing pretty well, because some of these teams will have close to a 90% change in personnel from year to year. So it's definitely one thing that I've learned about all sporting codes, because I think, or what I understand is the AFL, for example, tends to be a very cohesive kind of league, because you get people that have careers at one club and stay for a long time. I can't say what, say, rugby is like in New Zealand or what the NRL is in Australia so much, but my experience is that if you look at the great NBA franchises over time, like the Spurs, the Jazz, those sorts of clubs that had been successful over many decades because they'd had that cohesion at their core. So there's a lot to be gained by having just a consistency of approach there and a consistency with your personnel. And the other things I would say that added to our woes, Alonzo Burton hurt his hamstring pretty badly. He was out for 5 rounds early in the season, and Braden Inga, so two guys that have been very much core to the way we played. Braden had a season in the UK and didn't get back until some point in May. So if you remove the 5 starters we had from last year, and that's effectively what had happened, it was a starting again point, and as I said, that made it really tough.
It's tough when you're rooting for some of your players for their teams not to go deep in their other competitions, isn't it? But are you saying, say, 50% would be a great return rate from what, your top 5 or 6 players? Would that be sort of an ideal situation?
Yeah, just as a rule of thumb. I know that going back to Australia for the summer season, that I'll be returning about 5 players out of 10 there, and younger players contracted through to the 12. It'll actually be 7 out of 12 players I'll return to a team there. And so my experience is that the players get an understanding of how each other, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and they're little things. They're not often things that you can create instantly. It just becomes that bit of chemistry over time, just a look and a nod and, yep, I'm going here, and they just get that.
I guess what we've sort of probably learned in Southland over the last couple of years is this is a different league than it was when maybe we were dominating the league, isn't it? It's far more even, but also some of those teams in the bigger centres are pretty powerful, isn't it? And it is a real challenge to be able to compete with some of those sides.
Well, there's definitely been a huge inflation. I mean, I can remember watching some games in the league about 5 years ago, and across the board, you look at 11 teams now, it's so much deeper because and there's been a collection or I suppose a combination of talent at some of the big city clubs, and they're sort of organising themselves around Auckland and around Christchurch, Wellington. If you look at number of tall blacks players and that sort of thing, and I think the inflation will keep happening because basketball in this part of the world is becoming a massive thing. So the Southeast Asian League, the Japanese, Chinese, Australian leagues are all super strong. So the New Zealand League's going to be lifted up as a result of all of that. And here, I mean, where it's a regional club and it's the most remote regional club as well, ideas are our currency. We've got to find different ways to compete, because I think that the days of picking up a couple of tall blacks is just not going to happen organically. Either you've got to have to pay a premium and super top dollar to get them, or you just or you strike it lucky some other way. So I think that finding a good core of players and having that emerge over time is important, but you've got to do it in a different way here.
It was a significant change this season with the introduction of the Rapid League. What were the pros and cons of that introduction from your point of view?
Look, I embraced the Rapid League, and I know that there were lots of debate, pros and cons with it, I suppose. I felt that one of the things that would actually assist me is that if you've got players that come to training every week, train really hard, and they pick up a minute or two of court time or don't play at all in the NBL game, does a couple of things. So it stunts their growth, because games are where you really are going to improve. And then the other thing, it's just a motivation and an enjoyment factor. And so the Rapid League gave all the younger and less experienced players in the club an opportunity to play a game. I mean, I know it's a 4x4 game, but they've still had that competition and that experience. So when we got to NBL, because we had a pretty reduced rotation by the end of the season, we relied mainly on 7 players. But I didn't feel as much angst about, I've got to get a couple of young guys in just to give them a minute or two, because they'd already had the Rapid League. So I think that was a good thing about it.
And the payoff is down the track, right? I guess there from the game's point of view, you talk a lot about growing your own veggies and how important that is. It's a challenge, when you're up against basketball hotbeds like Auckland or Wellington or Christchurch. By comparison, obviously, just that local player depth isn't necessarily there. When you look at Rapid League, and I guess your experience with the Tall Ferns as well, and what you did over the Olympic cycle to get them within qualifying for a couple of baskets of an Olympic qualification. I don't want to necessarily bring that one up again for you, because I know that will still play on you, but that you can see where the game's going, right? So you've got to find ways to be able to grow with it, I guess, from the opportunity that's there from the game's point of view, yeah?
Well, the players have to be stretched, and like any sport, if you play against someone who's better than you, you soon learn.
Yeah.
I mean, you either find a way to get better or improve, or you quit. And our boys in Rapid League probably should have won more games than they did, and it was a big learning curve for them, because they had a tendency to start games really slowly, and I think a lot of that was just their own mental preparation for those games, and then their ability to put a game plan into action and then see it through and get a winning result at the other end of it. So they tended to start slowly, get really competitive, and we saw this a lot at ILT Stadium, and then they'd lose in the buzzer or lose in the last minute or so because they couldn't quite close the game out. So learning how to win was the thing that they didn't have, but how else are they going to get that? So it's a good experience.
You create a few interesting coaching challenges from, I mean, even just having access to the court at the start of the game and a few of those logistical sort of things.
Yeah, that was really weird. Didn't quite know what to do there all the time. We changed it a few times throughout because your regular basketball thing, the coach will do their final talk, final instructions, let's say 30 minutes, 20 minutes prior to the tip-off. But with the Rapid League going, so we had a couple of different ways that we went about it, but it did shift the day. It was an interesting thing. But our shoot-around on the morning of the game, which I suppose if you in rugby terms, that'd be, say, your captain's run or something like that. That became more of our last instructions there. And when we got to the game itself, it was pretty much the players had their own preparation in two separate blocks and then went and played it. So I took a few learnings away from that one.
What happens now? I mean, you probably might be able to help us too with this, but I mean, in terms of, the season's just finished, how far down the track does some of the contract or working with players to try form a squad for the next season? Or I guess guys are looking at what they're doing as well. I mean, what's the sort of rough sort of timeline on that sort of process, I suppose?
I don't know, Nick, if you want to answer that one. Look, Logan, I think the thing is that the league is not a very long one. So we begin in March, we finish in July. There's a big space of time. And to me, this has been a bit of an issue with the way that the calendar has been put together, because some of the gaps are far too big for the players, and there are some new initiatives like the Tupu League and various 3x3 events and that kind of thing. So I reckon the calendar's just got to fill up a little bit more with a bit more higher quality basketball rather than just be in one short space. I mean, that's not a decision we have to make. That's to do with the higher powers and the National Federation. But in terms of our evaluations, I mean, they'll be fairly pressing and immediate. But if we look at the imports and how that starts, we're a little bit at the mercy of Europe. So Caleb and Cooper came out of Europe, but their seasons didn't finish until May. So we need, if we can bring those guys back, it probably means, well, they would have to play in a shorter season in a country in Europe, or else if we wanted them back, we'd have to wait for them to get here. So we've got those sorts of decisions in front of us. So So that I mean, they're the things that we have to really evaluate this year in the Olympic qualifying for the Tall Blacks. A number of players were lost to their club teams because the Tall Blacks went over to Europe for the qualifying event, and we didn't have a Tall Black on our roster, but I'm sure all those clubs are sitting there and going, well, was that the correct decision, or ultimately better probably to have the player? But in the interim, not having the players, did that send us back too far? And so the other events and how the calendar is put together actually does impact you a bit.
Yeah.
And the other element with that too, the good news is the league's growing. The bad news is the league's growing. So it is literally a year-by-year proposition in terms of literally the framework from a roster building point of view, i.e. the rules that the league puts on it. It's developing, and as you come out of COVID as well, that's still to be expected as well. So, there's started to be a lot of feedback and a lot of discussion around multi-year agreements for that very reason. So that you can build rosters with a bit more surety to it, because it is hard when you're starting from scratch. On an annual basis. Not that we'd like to think we were, but I mean, obviously the really nice piece of feedback, and I think this is important to flag as well. Not that I've had the chance to actually give this to you, so I'll give it to you live on the podcast, Guy. But the nice thing is when you start talking to some of the players, in terms of formal review debriefs, as many challenges as the team had faced, the feedback from the players is outstanding, and the intentions, with no obligation attached to them, it's easy to say, admittedly, but the intentions are all to, would love to come back, which is what you want, right? You want players that have obviously had an enjoyable time. Yeah, sure, you want to win a few more basketball games, but you want to make sure that environment, which comes down to what old mate here has created, which is a real credit to you, Guy, is one which actually attracts them back, year on year. That's great when you're winning titles because it's nice and easy. It's harder when you're at the other end of the comp, which is, after a couple of challenging years, it's sort of been where we're coming from. But the nice thing is they've really enjoyed their time and the environment, and so we want to capitalise on that, no question.
Well, let's be honest, a lot of professional teams at 0-11, there could have been a mutiny on their hands, couldn't you? Naturally there's a bit of glimpse. So that's to finish well after that, because it could have gone. Guys will clock out and that. So.
Oh, and I think as we talked about it, and I know you said the same thing, guys, is that at the end of the day, whilst you can create the environment, you can't necessarily coach that. A lot of that comes down to the individual in terms of their individual standards and what playing for the team means for them. It's the nice thing probably to try and wrap it into a question so that I can shut up and you can start talking, Guy, as the guest. But it's the nice thing, isn't it? Like the organisation genuinely means something to these guys, and they showed it with the heart that they did show to dig out of that hole in the back half of the year.
Well, and credit to our fans as well.
Yeah.
Because we had great crowds even all the way through.
Yep.
Which to me was pretty amazing, because I've been in some situations before when, 35 years of head coaching, and unfortunately have endured 2 or 3 of these seasons, and they can turn ugly on the court and for members, fans, sponsors, all that sort of stuff. But our fans really stuck true and kept coming to games, and we felt like we owed them a little bit as well. And thankfully the team delivered there. But to the point, I know for a fact basketball, it can be a very cyclical sport, and the life cycle of the club is going to ebb and flow. So I think Canterbury Rams are an outstanding club, champions last year, minor premiers so far this year. Well, a decade ago they were out of the league, and so 10 years on, things can change. And so I'm always interested where a club's actually got itself positioned, and when things are down competitively, well, that's when you want to be planting all the seeds to make sure that the next cycle is going to come along and you can grab that when it's there. So lots of good things going on and lots of seeds being planted, and I think that they'll hold the club in good stead, and that's what we've got to be doing. I mean, we'd like it to be different. The fact that it's not different, I mean, we just can't moan and complain about it. We just got to get on and do the work and change our own destiny with this.
Now the Sharks are out of the competition. Who's your pick to win it? Putting on the spot.
Yeah, well, look, I do like Rams and Tuatara. They've lost a handful of games all season between them. I think Rams are the better defensive team of the two, and I think Tuatara is probably a better offensive team. I mean, if you look at five exceptional pros on their team with Corey Webster and Rob Lowe and Ruben Tarangi and who else they got there? Cam Glidden, Tom Vodanovic. I mean, that's an outstanding offensive team. I know we play those guys a couple of times, and they just punish you from wherever you pick your poison to try and help and exert a bit of defensive pressure. Then somebody else will step up and make that play against you. And I think 2 grand final losses for Tuatara in recent years. So I think that club will be pretty pumped to see their way through. Let's see, Taranaki Airs losing Sam Frolling to the Summer League will be a big blow for them. Wellington will be a bit of a smoky now that they've got Hiram Harris is back. Liafa is back in there, so they're back at full strength. So they'll be good. I mean, it'll be an interesting final series, but Franklin Bulls have shown on their day that they're very good, probably a little bit more like Canterbury, physical and athletic defensively. So, but at the end of the day, it could be an offense versus defensive battle with Rams and Tuatara.
So you've just picked 5 of the top 6 teams. That was good picking by you. That's good.
Well,
how that'll go at the TAB.
yeah. Well, and I should mention Nelson Giants as well.
That's right.
I like the regional clubs, so give them Hell Giants. So, it's good to see them battling in there.
And let's talk about you, right? You know, I mean, we can, I think, openly say in discussions with the intention to return for next season. Tell us a little bit about the off season, because you don't get much of a break, right? Because you've got a women's NBL gig to take care of in Sydney.
Coaching summer and winter, it's got its challenges when you keep going back to back. And but anyway, I mean, it into the cycle of it, I suppose. Now, going to head home to Melbourne, get about 5 weeks or so at home with the family. I haven't really seen them for about 10 months, so that will be good to reconnect there. And then, I mean, look, it's an interesting blend of things, coaching women's professional sport, men's professional sport, which kind of keeps me. I need to be paying attention, right? Because there are 2 completely different types of athletes there, and what works well with one doesn't necessarily work well with the other. So I've got to keep on my toes. But look, love with a passion both clubs that I'm working with, and feel very fortunate to be the head coach of both of these programs. And it's an exciting year coming up for the Flames back in Sydney as well, and while that's going along, then we'll also be recruiting for the Sharks.
That is an interesting perspective. What are the key differences between coaching male, female?
Well, a lot of it's to do with just the psychology of the athletes, not so much the tactical or technical basketball. I mean, if you do look at the basketball itself, the one element of the men's game that's possible is just playing above the ring, which doesn't happen in the women's version of the game. And so I got to say, with due respect to the men, that the girls can be a bit smarter, that they've got to find their way out tactically a bit more. They've got to be prepared to be stronger with their tactical methods, because the vertical spacing of the game is reduced, and they find other ways to compensate. And I've had a mix of men's and women's basketball coaching through my career, and I enjoy both equally. But from the basketball point of view, it's just a different thing, because you take away that above the rim presence and that type of athleticism. But then on the emotional or mental level with things, I suppose that the emotional swings can be, or the confidence swings can be a bit more extreme with the girls. I just find that they can lose their confidence quite a bit easier and take a bit of time to drag it back. And as a male coaching females, that gives me some ideas about how I need to directly work with athletes. A lot of the times the messages with the men are that, well, actually you can't do that. And I don't know what you're thinking, to think that is you, or you can do that. Somebody else is better doing that, and you need to get them the ball and let them do that, and you sit in your box and do this part.
It's not really said that way, though, is it?
Right.
Yeah. Keep the microphones out of the huddle. Yeah.
Different ways of getting that message across. But, it's a different thing emotionally, and, trying to get the guys to keep things a little bit simpler and drag back to roles and staying in their lane and doing their thing that's right by the club. That can be a little bit more of a challenge, and oftentimes it's getting the girls to come out of that lane.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
Well, and I will say that being a mere male, that the girls are way smarter than us. There's no doubt. I just want to make it that very clear.
Good. Yeah, that's the take home. Let's underline that point. Hey, listen, great stuff, mate. Great to have you in and chat it through. It's been a ride, and it's another. It's certainly has been an interesting one. But congratulations on the way you finished, and certainly from my personal point of view, that's a lot on the environment that you created. So it's a hell of a coaching job. So good stuff, man. Enjoy the off season.
Yeah, will do. Thanks, guys. Great to be here.
No, thank you.